It's 8:30 in the morning in Carson, California, part of the LA basin. There's an employee at work busily carrying out his duties. When he hears rapid gunfire in the employee parking lot. He knows gunfire when he hears it, and he knows to get down. When the gunfire stops, he goes and looks outside, and he sees a red SUV with a woman behind the wheel, covered in blood and slumped over the steering wheel. He looks at her, and she's obviously dead.
Call 911. Now.
A shooting in a parking lot in broad daylight. Who is this victim? Who benefits from this death? And who does she know that wants to fill her full of bullets? I spent my career closing murder cases. But I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
My name is Louis Aguilera. I'm a homicide detective for the LA County Sheriff's Department. By the time I was about 7 or 8 years old, I witnessed a homicide in my neighborhood. And at that young age, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go after those type of people.
Detective Louis Aguilera. He is an expert in homicide investigation. He has handled 350 homicides in his career.
Hey, Frank.
On the morning of October 8th, my partner and I saw breaking news.
You catching this?
On one of the televisions in the office. And the breaking news said that a person was shot and killed. And my partner and I said, well, we're gonna get this case.
He was up, as we say in homicide.
Aguilera.
Next case is his.
Within about 30 minutes or 45 minutes is when we got what we call the official call. And that gave us details of what happened.
All right, let's go.
So we immediately went out there. Once we arrived at the scene, we were briefed by the handling patrol deputy who told us that our victim was a 30-year-old female by the name of Veronica Reyes.
She is known to the workers there. They say she has children. They believe she is married and was apparently arriving for work when she was killed.
Co-workers said they heard a gunshot, came running out, found her.
She was an administrator at this logistics company, and as her co-workers like to say, she was the happiest, hard-working woman.
And we immediately noticed Veronica. She was laid on the ground, and her body was covered with a sheet.
When they see this woman, she's been disfigured by gunfire. She's shot twice in the head. One of those rounds broke her jaw, which distorts the face. Death distorts you as well.
I noticed that she had a lot of stippling on her face. That's the gunpowder and the metals and everything else projecting onto her face. And that's essentially a close gunshot wound. Our suspect was right on top of her. As I walked through the parking lot, there were numerous amounts of shell casings. We also saw that the windows had been shot out of the car, and there were bullet holes in her car as well.
They recover 8 expended casings from inside her car. Now they look at those casings and they are .40 caliber. The shooter is close enough to this car to when those expended casings come out of that gun, they go through the open window and wind up on the floor of the car.
So what do you think? Carjacking gone bad?
Not sure.
You always consider the possibilities as to how and why this occurred. Could it be a carjacking? No. Why not? Too much gunfire. No attempt at car theft. No attempt at anything. This is killing for the sake of it. Carjacking? Not a chance.
We got a second vehicle in the scene.
The patrol officers point out a truck that's been damaged minorly, brushed against or impacted in a bumper area, and then a shrubbery that's been crushed by what probably was a car. Is it connected to this crime? Probably it is.
Have we located any surveillance footage?
Not yet.
The street where the murder occurred is lined up with logistic companies, and logistic companies deal with freight. And by law, these logistic companies have to have surveillance cameras on their buildings. We were told that the murder was captured on surveillance video. You see on the footage Veronica pulling up to the parking lot in her red Explorer. As soon as she parks, a black, it looked like a BMW, pulls up and parallels her car. The driver immediately got out, forgetting to put the car in park.
The driver of the BMW is so intent on reaching his target, he bails out of a barely moving car as it is now moving backwards across this lot. He ignores the BMW. His focus is on who he wants to kill.
He ran up to her while she was still seated in the driver's seat and began firing numerous shots.
He plants his feet 20 inches apart for balance and proceeds to blast away.
The terror that I imagined Veronica was going through, that's what I remember when I first saw the video, was trying to put myself in her shoes, trying to think about what I would have done if I were being shot at.
She tried to put the car in reverse to get away, and at that point it was too late, and the car does what we call a death roll. It just rolled while she was deceased in the car and stopped once it hit a wall.
Then he realizes, once he's completed his shooting, that the car has wandered off, clipped the truck, and is stuck in the bushes. He runs back, he gets in the car, and disappears out of the lot, turning down the street.
You watch videos like that, and you wish somebody could just tell her, don't go to work. Don't. Stay out of that parking lot. It's really frustrating to watch.
The surveillance was good in that it showed us what happened. It showed us the type of car that was there. It showed us generally what the description of the defendant was, what kind of hat he had on, the shirt, the shoes he had on.
But you don't have a license plate. You don't have anything that stands out about that suspect. So we have a murder captured on video, but that's it.
Something to look for is that car. So Aguilera puts out an all-points bulletin for a black BMW containing an unknown male who may be armed and dangerous.
The family of Veronica showed up. You have an obligation to talk to those people. It's stressful, but My priority not only is solving the case, but I want to take care of that family.
How can I help you?
Yeah, I was talking to my sister on her cell when she was driving into work this morning, and it sounded like something bad happened. I heard this like popping sound.
Suddenly, in the middle of that conversation, the sister hears, "Oh no, oh no," and she hears loud popping sounds, which we know to be gunfire.
Why don't we go talk over here?
Now, obviously, she doesn't know the end result of that "oh no, no" and that loud noise. Aguilera has to tell her.
Your sister was murdered.
Death notification is a horrible business, but a necessary one. When he does, it devastates her. He has to let her sit for a while before he can talk to her further.
Is there anyone that you can think of who might want to hurt your sister?
Our job as homicide detectives is to not only find out who your suspect is, but you want to investigate who your victim was. And I wanted to get a background right there on the spot, as quickly as I could, what was going on with Veronica's life.
Everybody loved her. She was a great mom. She was a great sister.
Me and my sister were very close. She brought us all together as a great mom, a good friend, an amazing sister. And I'm sure my parents would say the best daughter.
My mother was very, I don't know if bubbly is the right word, but she was a very personable person. She liked people, she loved to dance, she loved to laugh. She had the dorkiest laugh, and it was contagious.
She also shared 4 young children with her husband, Carlos, and she had been with Carlos for 9 years.
She met Carlos in high school, so they were pretty much childhood sweethearts.
Were they still together?
They separated not that long ago. Once she left Carlos, I encouraged her to get on with life.
She started to move on. You could see the independence. I was like, okay, you know, you can go be with your friends, you know, I got the kids.
Started dating. She saw a couple people.
So her sister tells Aguilera that Veronica started to meet other people, new people, in the past couple of months. Well, who are they?
I'm very, very sorry.
And could they be part of this? Of course they could. Because somebody certainly is, and it's somebody very close to the victim. People kill for a reason. We just don't know what reason yet. It certainly could be somebody she just recently started dating. The problem is, who is that? We are trying to determine who in all of Los Angeles could be the one who took Veronica Reyes' life. As Aguilera continues his search for someone new in Veronica's life, he hopes her autopsy will reveal more information.
I've got some results for you, Detective.
We learned that she had sustained 11 gunshot wounds, and 7 of those gunshot wounds were fatal. The fatal rounds came from the abdomen area. She had been shot in the head as well.
The weapon was a .40 caliber Glock.
There's no other weapon involved. There's no stab wounds, no second gun, none of that.
She also sustained a significant wound to the left forearm.
It looked as though it was a defensive wound that when she saw him approaching her car, as she put it into park, she raised her left arm to block whatever he was going to do to her.
The last seconds of Veronica Reyes' life was trying to defend herself, making sure that she was protected so that she could be there for her kids. But obviously that did not work.
We need to find Veronica's husband.
Carlos Reyes?
Yeah.
We have several reasons to talk to Carlos Reyes.
Her sister said she lost track of him after Veronica left them.
Number one, they're not divorced. They're separated. He has to be notified of the death of his wife. he now has 4 children to raise and be responsible for. Secondly, what exactly were the circumstances of your separation? And is he aware of anyone Veronica has been dating? So Aguilera does what every policeman does. You get a name, you run the name in the system. Has he been arrested somewhere by anyone? Has he been in prison before? Who is Carlos Reyes?
Look at that.
Well, when Aguilera runs that name through the system lights up. Carlos is a frequent flyer. Carlos is a gangbanger. He belongs to the Wilmas, the oldest Hispanic gang in South Central LA, who are hopelessly dangerous.
I worked 12 years as a gang detective before I came to homicide. And the gang culture in LA is huge. Predominantly Black and Hispanic gangs, and they're everywhere in LA.
Let me just tell you, it's a scourge on society. I mean, it is a syndicate. The drug sales culture, the guns culture, the violence culture, and there are no sacred cows.
This area, South Central Los Angeles, Compton and the area surrounding it, is high crime. It always has been. It has an enormous influence of gang activity. There is drug sales and use, and there is violent crime that goes with it. Los Angeles and Los Angeles County has always suffered from gangs. Gangs have been around for thousands of years. The Chinese Tongs, the Yakuza in Japan, La Cosa Nostra in Sicily, all kinds of gangs. They form because they are able to provide something the person is not getting at home, which is love, respect, acceptance, discipline, a sense of purpose, all the things that humans enjoy, the sense of belonging to someone. What they demand in return is absolute loyalty to a criminal enterprise. You're willing to provide that loyalty to gain all those other things. Gangs are a social problem brought on by lack of parenting, misunderstanding, and all the other things that go wrong with society. The results are criminal enterprises. Those gangs in the 70s and 80s made the decision they should be like General Motors. They should franchise. And they began going around the country, starting up little groups of Crips and Bloods and other people to sell their narcotics. And the OGs, the original gangsters of the Crips and the Bloods, became the corporate board members who became incredibly wealthy, selling narcotics across the United States. But a very common thing in Los Angeles and Los Angeles County.
There are a ton of rivalries amongst gangs, but if you were to ask a young gang member, hey, why do you hate that gang across the street? I can guarantee you he won't have the answer. All he knows is he was born and raised to hate those people across the street because they have a different gang name.
So what are you thinking? Revenge attack from a rival gang?
Maybe.
Aguilera begins to wonder, what if Carlos has aggravated somebody from some other group, another street gang, who decides that not only Carlos needs to go away, but his whole family does?
We need to check in on Carlos Reyes.
What if they killed Veronica to show Carlos they mean what they say?
You see gang affiliation on the part of your spouse, you start looking. You start going out on the streets. You get your gang unit to go out and start asking questions.
So Aguilera sends cruisers right away to the Reyes home to make certain there's no gang activity around those houses.
LA County Sheriff's Office, come to the door.
I wanted them to get into that house and make sure I didn't have any other victims. So we sent detectives to his house to do a safety check.
Thank you there.
Hey, Chief.
They went into the house, no one was home. They checked for any additional victims.
Place is empty.
And they didn't find anyone.
I think he has some family nearby.
We found out from Veronica's family that he had a sister and a mother, local.
Go pick him up. I want to talk to him.
And I sent detectives down there to go talk to them and bring them to the local station.
Thanks for coming in.
They both knew when I spoke to them that the murder had occurred. They also were somewhat evasive when I asked them questions regarding Carlos and his whereabouts.
When's the last time you remember seeing him?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Or if they knew anything that had happened.
Joe's mother, you're telling me you don't know where he is?
It's the usual answer you get from people who don't want to be involved in something. So where's Carlos? Well, I don't know. I don't remember where he went. Really? Your own brother? You don't know where he is? Of course she knows. But she's not going to tell you.
Thank you very much for your time.
I didn't feel that either one of them was very helpful during the interview. So we didn't learn much from those interviews. But as a homicide detective, you have to exhaust every avenue of your investigation. We needed some more evidence.
Detective Aguilera is one of those individuals who leaves no rock unturned. He finds every piece of evidence, and in this case, he learned that one of the responding deputies noticed a abandoned black BMW around the corner from where Veronica was shot to death.
Aguilera put out a be on the lookout for her, and a patrol officer sees this BMW black.
Stormy detectives.
Calls it in and says, I think this is the car.
This our car?
Yeah, it even has the damage on the bumper, like you said.
We saw the traffic collision damage on the car, which was perfectly aligned with what happened at the scene. The vehicle actually still had some shrubbery on it from running into the bushes.
Aguilera looks at it and says, there's no question. That's it. That's the one.
Call the DA for a warrant for the inside.
Yes, sir.
This could contain fingerprints, DNA, weapon, ammunition, who knows? It's the shooter's car, there is no doubt. But who is the shooter? Aguilera and his partner get a warrant to search the car. They find beer cans, a bunch of other crap, junk, clothing.
Well, then they notice there's a man's wallet in this car. Okay, this is really strange. Somebody forgot to take their wallet.
They open that wallet, and there is a California driver's license and photograph of Carlos Reyes.
The same Carlos Reyes who was married to Veronica, but that still doesn't say anything. They don't know if there was another person who drove that black BMW.
And it didn't make sense to me that those items were left in the car. Why were they left in the car?
So then they start thinking third party. Okay, so maybe he was held at gunpoint and maybe someone else killed his wife. Who knows?
They also find a receipt in this car for a hotel room in the area, and the receipt is dated 1 day before the homicide. And the name in this receipt is Paige Sanchez.
So now our concern is, where's this female? Let's find out who she is, and let's get to that casino and start looking at some surveillance footage.
So they go to this hotel, and they talk to the manager that was on duty. Said, yeah, she came in, she paid for the room, and there was a Hispanic guy with her.
The manager walked us into their surveillance area, and we were able to see Carlos and this female arriving in the casino. The thing that stood out to us, he carried a metal box with him. It looked like a gun box, like an ammunition box. And it was just the night before the murder.
Then you can see them going to the elevators.
He was affectionate with this female. They obviously knew each other, hugging each other in the elevator. Our question is she involved in this homicide?
Then you see them early that morning walking out of the casino, out of the hotel, and the girl getting into a taxi and leaving. And then later you see Carlos leaving.
Aguilera sees the circumstances. Does he know what they mean? No, he doesn't. And he's smart enough to know that. He requires further inquiry, as they say.
Yeah?
Hi, I'm Detective Aguilera.
When they first meet Paige Sanchez, she's somewhat alarmed at their presence.
Do you know Carlos Reyes?
Yes.
We found a receipt for a recent hotel stay. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that with us?
We were just there for the weekend.
She seems rather surprised, and that surprise seems to be genuine. Point for her side.
You do realize that Carlos is married.
Yes, I do know that.
Do you also know that his wife was just murdered?
What?
She was upset. She knew they were separated, but she also knew that they had children. And that was a concern to her, that there were 4 kids with no mother.
I've only really known him for like 3 months.
She told us that they had been drinking for the last several days. She said they went bar hopping.
She admits to sheriffs they were drinking, gambling, partying, having a great time. But on the morning that Veronica will be killed, he's up at 7:03 in the morning with a beer in his hand. And they're checking out of this casino hotel.
Once we said goodbye, it was kind of weird.
What do you mean?
She said he seemed as if he was never going to see her again. In the sense like, thank you for everything. I appreciate you. And he made her feel as if that was the end of their relationship.
It was a goodbye that she described as kind of strange. There was a lot of indication that he was going to do something out of the ordinary.
We believe that she had absolutely nothing to do with this homicide, but we believe that he was saying his final goodbye because once he left there, he was going to kill Veronica and he was going to flee.
So they go back to the sister again about the relationship between her sister Veronica and Carlos.
Just have a few questions.
She never told me everything, but towards the end, she told me some stuff.
Yeah, things between them were getting really, really bad.
I know that Carlos stole her bag from her like a week or 2 before that. I know he busted all the windows in her car. That's when we're like, wow, okay, this is not good.
And the sister tells Aguilera that Carlos has been abusive, so much so this caused her sister to file for divorce.
Why do you keep doing this? To sum up my relationship with Carlos, I knew he was my dad, but he was Carlos. I could always tell when Carlos was gonna start fighting with my mom. He would get this look in his face, he would get very aggressive. He would ball up his fist. He was very explosive. He had a tendency of breaking down doors, punching through walls. When he was in a real fit or whenever he was drunk or high, my siblings and I would push our drawer against the bedroom wall and we would just stay in there until he left.
In the process of the investigation, we learned that she filed for divorce approximately 11 days before she was murdered. And that in itself is an indication that she was ready to move on. It's an indication that she wanted to end the cyclical effects of domestic violence.
A couple days after the murder, we processed Veronica's car, and we found several things that were heartbreaking to us. And one of them was a journal that Veronica kept. One of her entries had several strands of her hair taped to the day that Carlos pulled her hair out. And she wrote underneath that hair, "Carlos pulled my hair out."
As soon as she came to us and told us what was going on, my husband and I, we gave her the money for the divorce. We helped her to get out.
And there were several writings from Veronica in the journal, and one of them said, basically, get Carlos out of her life, essentially. Her notes are get divorced and away from Carlos, make money, live on my own, and change my way of thinking.
Veronica Reyes did all the right things to get rid of Carlos. She did. She thought it over. She made decisions. She obtained an attorney. She filed a restraining order against him.
It's just everything you tell a woman to do who's a victim of domestic violence.
She had had it. She was done. She was moving on with her life.
Veronica did everything she could. It was not enough. Two and two still makes four the last time I checked. Carlos is a gangbanger, which means he's got all the skills and all the necessary temperament to blast her to kingdom come. Aguilera gets his cell phone records.
We start getting alerts that his phone is on the 5 freeway, going southbound.
Interstate 5 covers north to south most of California. It's humongous. And it is the gateway to Mexico. It's obvious what he's doing.
And if he got to Mexico, we were concerned that we would never find him again.
He is trying to disappear into Mexico. If he crosses into that world, he may as well be in the cosmos. The hunt is now on for Carlos Reyes for first-degree murder. Aguilera gets his phone records, and it pings going south on I-5. And it pings stop at the border crossing at San Ysidro.
Now we have to do an alert.
I need to put out an APB.
And notify the authorities at the border. Hey, look for this person.
Carlos Reyes.
Here's a DMV photo. If you see him, please detain him for us. We didn't have confirmation that he actually made it, but we were pretty certain that he did. And the concern was that it's such a big country. There's so many places to hide, and we would never see him again.
At this point, all Aguilera can do is wait. But a Sheriff's Department gang unit detective knocks on his door.
Hey, might have some information for you.
What you got?
And the gang detective said, hey, I have an informant, and this informant knows where your suspect is at.
There are confidential informants who are in the business of making a little extra cash. They're not going to go to court. They're just going to tell you what's happening.
Yeah, you got caught the red light.
No kidding.
Once you go through the Mexican border, you either get a red light or a green light. It just randomly pops up.
And once they decide to search your car, they're going to find what's in it. They are not good at it. They are experts at it. They'll find your concealed compartment inside your gas tank. They'll find everything. And a weapon was found in a hidden compartment behind the stereo in his car.
The agents arrested him for bringing a firearm into Mexico.
The guy they stopped was called Arturo Lopez.
Lopez?
Yeah.
Our guy's called Carlos Reyes.
So is it Carlos Reyes or not? The informant says it is. Informants say a lot of things. But is this reliable? That's when Aguilera gets a hold of an agent that he knows and says, can you find this guy in jail?
Guillermo, it's Louis Aguilera.
I contacted Special Agent Guillermo Ion. He is an expert at tracking down people in Mexico. He has contacts in Mexico that we don't.
And thinking that maybe a different name was used, we started comparing all the individuals that had been detained or arrested for that suspected day, and eventually we found him under a different alias.
It was a really short turnaround where Guillermo said, I found your guy. He sent us the booking photo from Mexico. There was no doubt in our mind that the booking photo from Mexico was Carlos Reyes.
At the border, when that agent searched the car, the driver identified himself as Arturo Lopez. Not only does he get stopped, he provides false ID, because he knows he's being looked for. Well, guess what, Carlos? You just got found.
I was thrilled, but I was concerned that we're now dealing with Mexico. He was sentenced that week to 5 years in prison.
Mexico is incredibly strict about its gun laws. You try to bring a gun illegally into Mexico, you will pay a price. They do not dance around. It's not a welcome wagon, like, come on in, American detectives, we'll do everything we can to help.
And I was upset at it, but I know there was nothing that we had that was gonna bring him from his prison sentence in Mexico. Would we ever get Carlos back to the States?
Aguilera needs that gun to run some tests and connect it to Veronica's murder. The problem is that gun is in Mexico, and the Mexican authorities are less than cooperative.
Is this gun that was found on the defendant the same gun that killed Veronica Reyes?
The firearms recovered at the border go to their military.
That gun was in the evidence locker of the Mexican military in Mexico here in Tijuana.
When we go down there, we have to make sure it's our murder weapon by firing it, bringing back the bullets and the casings to compare it to what we have here in LA.
They had a common process that is used. In this case, they used telephone books, the old traditional yellow telephone books that we all have.
Now, way back in the day, ballistics tests were performed with phone books. They'll stop bullets. But in the modern day, they don't have phone books. Except in Mexico, they still do. So the ballistics guy goes old school. And the ballistics man puts 3 phone books in a cardboard box and fires a round into the phone books. Boom! Into the box. Gets into that 3rd book, there's his bullet. It'll go through 2, but it won't go through 3. So unconventional, yes, but it works.
We then retrieved the casings and the bullets, and we took those samples back to the United States for comparison.
I remember driving back from Mexico, all of us, with the ballistic evidence and just hoping this has to be our murder weapon.
They compare the ballistics to the bullets removed from the victim.
So it was important to see the pattern that was on the bullet and see that the pattern matched what they found at the crime scene. It's sort of like a fingerprint.
Okay. Thank you.
I remember getting a phone call saying, hey, Louis, I just want you to know I am 100% certain it's your gun. Coupled with the evidence we built to that day, now we have him arrested with our murder weapon, made me feel a lot better about the case.
You look back over the events in this case, and you begin to get a very good idea of what took place. Veronica Reyes meets a man, Carlos Reyes. They marry. Progressively, his abusive personality begins to be exposed. It starts off verbally, making comments. Then the pushing and shoving happens. Then the slapping begins. And Veronica decides this is no way to live. She files for divorce.
And that is the ultimate slap in the face. For her to take that step and file for divorce, I think set him off.
Carlos is what he is. He's an abusive male. And abusive males have another feature of their personality. If I can't have you, nobody's gonna have you. You insulted me by divorcing me. I'm gonna take you out. He suffers emotionally when he's served. What's his response? Alcohol. Female companionship. But the alcohol grinds on him, lowers his level of inhibition.
The partying was just a cover for how mad he was. So I'm gonna hang out with this woman for 3 days, and we're gonna have a big party, and I won't think about it. But then she keeps creeping into his mind, and he gets angrier and angrier.
Thinking about nothing but Veronica until it arrives at an emotional crescendo. He gets in that car, and he knows where to find her, and he shows up too.
We think he probably arrived at the scene early in case Veronica arrived to work early and just waited for her car to show up in that parking lot. She pulls up to her work, which should be a safe place. And she's killed by her husband, the father of her children. And then he flees to Mexico.
And is he really that stupid that he would leave a car registered to himself and his wallet in the car?
Mexico was not going to release him to our custody until he served those 5 years in prison. So now my concern is, how are we going to keep track of someone in a Mexican prison for 5 years?
Reyes, utilizing the level of corruption in the Mexican penal system, pays off guards to keep getting him transferred to different jails to make him more difficult to find.
Now the fear was making sure that Mr. Reyes did not potentially bribe his way out of jail, right? We're checking in with the warden, and they got to the point where I'll let you know if anything happens, but he's still here.
Eventually, as the release date neared, we made contact with our Major Crimes Bureau extradition team to work out the logistics of flying him back to the States.
They basically snatched him up from that prison, and then he's flown back from Mexico City to the United States in the custody of a U.S. Marshal.
I knew I wanted to be there when he arrived at the airport. Our major crimes team brought him off the airplane, and myself and my partner took custody of him at LAX. He didn't seem upset. He didn't seem sad, remorseful, nothing. Just as a matter of fact.
Welcome home, Reyes.
When do I go to court, was his question. And then we took him to a local station where we booked him for murder. Carlos was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder, stalking, the use of the firearm, and he was ultimately sentenced to 55 years to life.
This crime occurred on October the 8th of 2008. He isn't sentenced in a U.S. court until 2015, 7 years later.
Learning to cope, learning to be okay is something that I do every day, which is also why I wear her necklace, so that she feels closer to me, and it's how I feel closer to her. Because being without her is very, very hard. It hurt.
We pulled out money from our 401k, got a house that would house everybody, and within 2 weeks, they were out of foster care and they lived at home with us. I hope she's proud of what we've done.
I always have that thought in the back of my head that I wish I'd never handled this case because I wish it never would have happened.
There is a moment here where you throw a stone in a pond, but the ripples go on and on. 4 children that don't have a mother, who never really had a father. They are thriving now, but they all want their mother back, and she's never coming back.
About by closest friends. And the profoundly strange coded messages Mark proudly posted on social media, claiming he was tracking her movements. Someone heavily manipulated Melissa Casillas that day. Someone violently made her deeply believe she had to disappear to protect her daughter. Or someone forced her hand into the ultimate shadow. The cold truth is remarkably patient. It does not magically decay like a fragile body in the high desert heat. It sits quietly and waits for a detective willing to ignore the pathetic smoke and mirrors. A detective who fundamentally knows that when a husband aggressively speaks ill of his missing wife, while the bed sheets are still reasonably warm, you are looking straight at the devil, sitting comfortably in the living room. Humans are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. I tell you, in my years working homicide, I have seen the darkest corners of the human soul, and it never ceases to amaze me how supposedly intelligent species can act out of sheer, primitive malice. Our story begins in the small town of Winnsboro, Texas, a place where everyone knows your name, your family, and your business. Winnsboro is the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked at night. That is a beautiful sentiment, until the devil realizes the door is wide open. On May 4th, 2007, 19-year-old Brittany McGlone learned that lesson in the most tragic way possible. Brittany was a good kid. She worked an overnight shift at a distribution center and held a second job at a local discount store. She was exhausting her own body, pushing herself to the absolute limit, trying to save up enough money for nursing school. She wanted to heal people. She wanted a future. Her inner world was filled with quiet ambition, driven by the pure desire to build something solid and respectable out of her youth. But predators do not care about your dreams. They only care about your vulnerability. After finishing a grueling overnight shift, instead of going straight home to her own bed, she broke her routine. She went home with her boyfriend, a young man named Jeff. She simply wanted to spend a few quiet moments with him before he had to leave for the day to pick up his grandmother. By 9 o'clock in the morning, Jeff and his stepfather left the house, leaving Brittany sound asleep. Sleep is the one time we surrender ourselves completely to the universe. We trust the walls around us to keep the monsters at bay. Fast forward to 3:30 in the afternoon. Brittany is not answering her telephone. Her mother, Patricia, feels that cold, heavy dread settling in the pit of her stomach. A mother always knows when the world has tilted off its axis. Jeff returns home, walks into his bedroom, and his world ends. Brittany is dead. She is completely naked. The room is painted with violence, displaying the kind of cast-off blood spatter that tells me someone swung a heavy, blunt object with immense fury. Yet, the weapon is nowhere to be found. The killer took it with them. But they left something else behind. The killer took a shower in that very house. My, you have a young woman brutally beaten to death in a bed, and the monster responsible is so devoid of human empathy, so utterly arrogant and cold, that he calmly steps into the adjacent bathroom, turns on the water, and washes the evidence of his sins down the drain, while his victim lies dead just a few feet away. This tells me volumes about the psychology of our suspect. This is not a panic burglar who made a mistake. This is a calculated predator who feels completely comfortable in that environment. Someone who believes they are entirely untouchable. In homicide, you always look at the person who shares the bed first. We look at the boyfriend, Jeff. But Jeff has an alibi. A solid one, backed by video surveillance from a convenience store miles away. We look at a dark family secret involving a grandfather, but his time cards at work clear him completely. Then, a shadow emerges from the periphery of this family. A 25-year-old man named Chad Carr. Chad is dating the teenage sister of Jeff. He is a grown man hanging around a high school girl, which already tells me his emotional maturity is severely stunted and his moral compass is fundamentally broken. Chad admits he stopped by the house around 8:30 that morning to get something for his teenage girlfriend. He knew Brittany was there. He knew she was alone and asleep. The investigators begin to pull on this thread, and the entire world of the suspect starts to unravel. He gives a detailed timeline of his day, a timeline so intricate, so overly explained, that it reeks of rehearsed deception. Innocent people do not remember every single minute of a random Tuesday unless they are desperately trying to hide the 1 hour they committed a murder. Between 9:21 in the morning and 10:20 in the morning, Chad is unaccounted for. He claims he went home to change clothes because of the weather. You have to be kidding me. The weather that morning was exceptionally mild, sitting in the upper 60s. He did not change clothes because he was warm. He changed clothes because he was soaked in the blood of an innocent 19-year-old girl. The arrogance of this man is simply staggering. When questioned, Chad tries to play the victim of circumstance. But we dig into his past, and the past never stays buried. In 2001, Chad was involved in a vicious attack on a woman named Debbie. He waited until she was alone in a small trailer, cornered her, and struck her in the head with a heavy red jack handle. He panicked that time and made excuses. But predators learn from their mistakes. They refine their brutal craft. Chad learned that blunt force trauma is effective, and by 2007, he had evolved into a killer who makes sure the victim cannot talk back. The psychological profile here is glaringly obvious. Chad is a man who harbors a deep, simmering rage. He is a man who cannot succeed in the daylight. A man who feels small, insignificant, and powerless in the eyes of society. So, how does a coward make himself feel big? He finds someone weaker. He stalks the shadows of a house he has no business being in. He views women not as human beings with souls and aspirations, but as objects to be controlled, dominated, and destroyed when they are most defenseless. We look closer at the behavioral evidence. His teenage girlfriend notices he smells distinctly of her specific shea butter body wash when he picks her up that afternoon. Why would he smell like that? Because he used it in her shower after he slaughtered a girl in the next room. Police execute a search warrant and find size 5 white women's underwear in his residence. Brittany wore a size 5, and her underwear was missing from the crime scene. Yet, when confronted with the reality that investigators are testing for genetic evidence, Chad preemptively declares to the authorities that his genetic material will not be found on that girl or in that room. Innocent men do not speak like that. Guilty men who think they have scrubbed a crime scene clean say things like that. He is taunting the police. He is sitting in an interrogation room, dripping with fake innocence, truly believing his own lies. It makes me sick to my stomach. But justice in this world is a flawed and fragile machine. In 2022, a new sheriff with a real backbone finally slaps handcuffs on Chad Carr. They charge him with capital murder, but the legal system falters. A grand jury fails to indict him, returning a no bill. Chad walks out a free man, a smug grin likely plastered across his face as he steps back into the sunlight. But let me tell you something about cold cases and homicide detectives. We do not forget. We are extraordinarily patient. We sit in the dark and we wait for the arrogant to make one final, fatal mistake. Brittany McGlone was a bright light in a dark world. A hard-working girl whose life was stolen by a pathetic, violent coward who could only strike when she was sleeping peacefully. Her family waits in agony, holding on to the faded memories of a daughter who deserved a long, beautiful life. And the man who took that life might be walking the streets today, breathing free air, but his soul is already condemned. We will keep looking. We will keep testing the evidence. Because in the end, the truth is a relentless hound, and no matter how fast or how far you run, it will eventually catch you. Humans are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine, and they lie with the clumsiness of a toddler holding an empty cookie jar. I tell you, when you have sat across from enough of these individuals, you start to realize that the criminal mind is rarely a masterpiece of dark genius. It is usually a chaotic mess of greed, cowardice, and profound stupidity. Take a night in late November the year 2016. The town is Benson, North Carolina. It is around 3 a.m, a time when honest people are asleep and the devil is just finishing his shift. Two men, Julian Valles Jr. and Jeremy Carpenter, stroll up to police officers in a parking lot. They do not look panicked. They just need a locksmith. They claim their friend, a 22-year-old kid named Christopher Cole Thomas, got paranoid pulled. The car overtook the keys and vanished into the dark. My, you have to be kidding me. You expect me to believe a young man from Florida stranded in a town he does not know just sprinted into the abyss for absolutely no reason, while his so-called friends just shrug their shoulders and worry about getting back to their construction jobs in Minnesota. That is the kind of bold-faced lie that insults the intelligence of everyone in the room. Cole was not just some wanderer. He was a smart kid, a salutatorian, a young man who wanted to go into medicine to help his autistic brother. He was taking a break, working with his hands, trying to figure out this complicated world. He trusted these men, and that was his first and final mistake. What these fools did not bother to tell the police or the parents of Cole was that this was no innocent Thanksgiving road trip. It was a cross-country run for methamphetamine. Julian and Jeremy were not looking for turkey. They were looking for a high and a quick buck. The truth only began to bleed out when the father of Cole, sensing the terrifying silence of his son, tracked down a coal worker named Stephen, who spilled the darkest secret a parent could hear telling. Him, he thought the boys killed Cole. The parents drive through the night from Florida, their hearts shattered, fueled by that primal instinct to protect their child. And what do the police find when they press these amateur hour criminals? The story bends. It always bends. They admit to the drug deal over in Mount Olive with a couple of local heavyweights named Rudy and TJ. They claim Cole panicked on the drive back. But a brilliant investigator named Percy spent night after agonizing night scouring surveillance footage until he found a ghost in the machine. At exactly 1:10 in the morning on a grainy camera behind a Walgreens, there is Cole walking in the dark, and right behind him, trailing like the Grim Reaper, is Jeremy. You see, the lies were unraveling. Confronted with his Jeremy spins another yarn, claiming they went to a church he kneeled to pray for, his diabetes in his soul, and when he opened his eyes, Cole was gone, replaced by the ominous sound of a slamming car door. I tell you, if I had a nickel for every time a suspect suddenly found religion when the handcuffs started clinking, I would be a very wealthy man. The digital footprint, however, does not pray, and it does not lie. The cell phone data mapped out a conspiracy of cowards. The phones moved together from Mount Olive to Benson, stopped where Cole allegedly ran, and then, inexplicably, the phone of Cole began moving again with the others after he supposedly vanished. Why would a fleeing man leave his phone, and why would his friends take it with them as they met up with the very dealers they were supposedly running from, turning it off just after 4 in the morning? The working theory pieced together by a private investigator named David Marshburn, who had to wade through the murky waters of death threats, reveals the tragic psychology of a double cross gone horribly wrong. Julian likely planned to buy the meth and then steal it back, keeping the product and the cash. But Julian made a fatal miscalculation about the young man behind the wheel. Cole was a pre-med student who spoke fluent Spanish. In the claustrophobic confines of that car, surrounded by greedy men whispering their treacherous plans, Cole understood every word. He realized he was the unwitting getaway driver for a suicide mission. The panic was real. The terror was justified. In ensuing chaos, drugs were tossed out the window, the plan imploded, and the wolves turned on the sheep. They needed a scapegoat for the missing narcotics, and the smart kid from Florida was a perfect Sacrifice. The dealers called in a thug named Gordo who admitted to hunting Cole down and throwing him into A. Vehicle possibly disorienting him with a baseball bat. They shattered the future of a bright, compassionate young man over bags of cheap poison. The emotional agony inflicted on the parents of Cole is immeasurable to know their boy suffered in. His final moments surrounded by strangers who viewed his life as collateral damage. Even when the father of Cole took the astonishing, heartbreaking risk of bailing TJ out of jail just to appeal to his humanity, just to beg for the location of the body of his son, he was met with cowardice. These men sat in interrogation rooms and gave fractions of truth, protecting their own miserable hides while a family drowned in grief. The obstruction charges were eventually dropped to preserve a future homicide case, and Jeremy took his secrets to the grave in the year 2024. But the data remains. The silence of Wayne County speaks volumes. Someone knows exactly where Christopher Cole Thomas is buried. Someone is waking up every single morning with the ghost of a 22-year-old boy standing at the foot of their bed. Humans are strange creatures indeed. They think a secret buried in the dirt will stay there forever. But the truth has a funny way of clawing its way back to the surface, and when it does, no amount of lies, no fabricated prayers in a church parking lot will save them from the reckoning that is coming. If anyone holds the final piece of this puzzle, they need to call the Benson Police Department at 919-894-2091 or the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation at 919-779-8188 before the data finishes telling the story. They were too cowardly to confess. Human beings are strange creatures. They will run from their own shadows only to walk right into the mouth of a wolf. They kill for the most absurd reasons you could possibly imagine, and they look for fresh starts in the most desolate places on earth, dragging their demons right along with them. My name is Joe Kenda. I spent over 2 decades working homicide, and I tell you, some cases do not just leave a file on your desk. They leave a stain on your soul. This is one of them. The date is October 17th, 2009. We are in Latimer County, Oklahoma, an unforgiving stretch of rugged terrain where people go to disappear. A local sheriff gets a call about an abandoned truck sitting on a narrow dirt road on Panola Mountain. When deputies arrive, they find the vehicle locked tight. Inside is a small dog, emaciated, starved, and barely clinging to life. You have to be kidding me. Who leaves a helpless animal to die in a steel box? That right there's your first indisputable clue that whatever happened on that mountain was not a planned vacation. It was a sudden and violent interruption of daily life. The deputies break the glass to save the animal and look inside the cabin. What do they find? The keys are still sitting in the ignition. Winter coats are left behind. A cellular telephone equipped with a global positioning system is resting on the console. Identification cards belonging to Bobby and Sherilyn Jameson are present. And tucked carefully beneath the seat is $32,000 in cold, hard cash. My. I have interviewed thousands of criminals and victims in my career, and I can assure you of one universal truth. People who are planning to walk into the woods and end their own lives do not carefully hide $2,000 under a seat before they do it. Then the deputies find a letter. It is 7 pages long, filled with pure, unadulterated venom. Sherilyn writing to her husband, Bobby. She calls him a monster. She accuses him of beating her so hard he nearly broke her spine. She talks about demons and God and spiritual warfare. When you read a document like that, you are not just reading words on a page. You are looking directly into the mind of someone who is deeply and tragically fractured. Sherilyn was fighting a war inside her own head. She suffered from bipolar disorder, deep depression, and severe attention deficits. We know she had stopped taking her psychiatric medication. When a person does that, the world warps around them. Shadows become physical threats. But a bitter letter does not equal a murderer. It merely equals a miserable and broken marriage. Let's examine who these people actually were. Bobby Jameson was a man ruined by a severe automobile collision. His back was destroyed, leaving him in chronic agony. He turned to prescription pain medication to survive the day, and as it always happens, the pills soon became his master. Sherilyn joined him in that dark place. They were two drowning people holding on to each other, pulling each other straight down to the bottom. And caught in the middle of this whirlpool was a beautiful 6-year-old little girl named Madison. That is the part that breaks my assistant, Cloud of Misfortune. Chow Tran and his mother-in-law had located an advertisement in a local Vietnamese newspaper for a spiritual guide named Daphne Wright, who operated out of Houston, approximately 250 miles away, hoping to restore harmony and success to their business. Chow had traveled to Houston to consult with Daphne. The family placed immense trust in her rituals, believing she possessed the ability to bring positive energy and good fortune into their lives. However, over the course of several months, their financial challenges persisted, and the debt associated with these spiritual services began to grow significantly, eventually reaching a sum between $250,000 and $280,000. For nearly 2 years, the case presented few active leads, testing the patience and resolve of the police department. Yet, the detectives never gave up hope, knowing that truth has a way of revealing itself in due time. The breakthrough came in the year 2015 through an unexpected turn of events, involving a young man named Willie Guillory. Willie, who had recently reached adulthood, was arrested in connection with a separate incident involving the unauthorized taking of a horse in Houston. Because this was a felony conviction, his information was entered into the national database. To the surprise of investigators, his profile matched a tiny fragment of evidence recovered from the apartment in Arlington 3 years prior, when investigators interviewed Willie, who was 16 years old at the time of the incident. He began to share his perspective of the events. He explained that his uncle, Bobby Guillory, a 52-year-old man who had fell on hard times, had asked him to assist with a task in Arlington. Willie described how they had traveled to the apartment and staged the scene to resemble a typical burglary, using items to suggest gang involvement. Willie further claimed that the entire plan had been set in motion by Daphne Wright, who was seeking to recover the substantial outstanding balance for her spiritual consultations. According to the accounts provided by the Guillory family, Daphne had learned of substantial life insurance policies held by the family, which were valued at approximately $850,000. The investigation began to focus on the connections between all parties involved. On December 16th in the year 2015, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, to speak with Bobby Guillory. Confronted with the developing evidence, Bobby expressed remorse and corroborated his nephew's account, pointing to Daphne as the central figure who had organized the plan, promising him $10,000 for his assistance. Detectives then turned their attention to Daphne Wright, visiting her residence in Houston on August 31st in the year 2016. She was a mother of 3 daughters, described by neighbors as a strong-willed individual who managed her household with authority. During their search, investigators discovered detailed records of her spiritual consulting business, noting fees ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 for various services. To build a comprehensive case that would stand in a court of law, prosecutors entered into discussions with Chow Tran, offering him immunity in exchange for a complete and honest testimony regarding the financial arrangements and the interactions with the spiritual advisor. Chow explained to court that the family felt an intense pressure to resolve their debts, believing that Daphne possessed spiritual influence over their lives. He testified that the pressure had led to a desperate decision to utilize the insurance policies to satisfy the outstanding financial obligations. The trial of Daphne Wright commenced on August 26 in the year 2019. The courtroom was filled with community members, legal professionals, and journalists, all watching the culmination of years of meticulous police work. Chow Tran took the stand, describing the dynamics of their interactions and the overwhelming weight of their financial agreements. The defense questioned the credibility of the testimonies, suggesting different motivations. But the jury focused on the extensive chain of communication and physical evidence presented by the prosecution. In September of the year 2019, the jury reached a verdict, finding Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that she would no longer be able to influence or harm others. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced legal accountability for their roles in the events. While the resolution of the case brought a sense of peace, Detective Stewart and the members of the Arlington Police Department remained reflective. They recognized that the true heart of the story lay in the resilience of the community and the memory of Long and Hong, two gentle individuals who had crossed oceans to build a life of love and hope. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, who slowly began to heal, supported by the warmth and solidarity of their neighbors. The experience served as a powerful reminder of the importance of community, the strength found in mutual support, and the enduring belief that justice, guided by dedication and truth, will always find its way into the light. The morning sun over North Texas always brought a peculiar kind of promise, casting a golden, heavy warmth over the sprawling streets of Arlington. It was a city of quiet neighborhoods, bustling commercial plazas, and a vibrant tapestry of cultures that had woven themselves into the local soil over several decades. Among the many who had sought refuge and a new beginning in this vast landscape was a community of families who had crossed oceans to redefine their destinies. Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu, were the very definition of this quiet resilience. In the year 2000, they had packed their lives, their memories, and their deepest hopes into a few suitcases and departed Vietnam. They did not come merely to find safety. They came to build a legacy, settling in Arlington. They found a place where the air was wide and the opportunities seemed as limitless as the horizon. Together with their 3 children, they set about constructing their own version of the classic American dream. Long was a man of quiet dignity, whose hands bore the calluses of decades of hard work, while Hong possessed an energetic, nurturing spirit that kept the family anchored. They understood that the foundation of any great endeavor was labor, and so they established a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, located in a rented commercial space filled with the rhythmic hum of industrial sewing machines and the bright, clean scent of newly dyed fabrics. To help navigate the complexities of this new world, they leaned heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was a young man of 38 years who possessed a sharp mind and a comfortable command of the English language. Because of his ability to speak fluently and confidently, he became the public face of the enterprise. He negotiated with suppliers, spoke with contractors, and managed the daily business relationships that kept the sewing machines humming. For nearly a decade, their efforts were rewarded with remarkable success. The rhythm of their lives was steady and prosperous. They secured contracts that would make any small business proud, culminating in a highly lucrative agreement to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, the Disney Corporation. During these golden years, the family felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had proven that dedication, unity, and honest labor could indeed fashion a prosperous life out of nothing. But the tides of commerce are notoriously fickle. By the year 2011, the winds of fortune began to shift. The vital contract with the entertainment giant was lost, and almost overnight, the steady stream of orders dwindled to a trickle. The hum of the sewing machines grew quiet, and a heavy, anxious silence began to settle over the family workshop. Chapter 2, The Shadow of Doubt. As the financial pressure mounted, the family began to feel as though an invisible weight had settled over their shoulders. In traditional Vietnamese culture, such a sudden and persistent string of misfortune was rarely viewed as mere coincidence. For thousands of years, there had existed a deep-seated belief in the delicate balance of spiritual forces. in the protective deities of wealth and the quiet undercurrents of unseen energies that could influence human lives. When a family business faced ruin, or when personal relationships began to fracture under stress, it was not uncommon to seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor. These individuals were believed to possess the rare ability to read the unseen world, to offer protection, and to lift any curses that might have been placed upon a household by jealous rivals or negative forces. Hong Lu, feeling the desperate need to protect her children and grandchildren from financial ruin, began searching for a solution. She and her son-in-law, Chao Tran, turned to the local Vietnamese language newspapers, scanning the advertisements for someone who could offer a spiritual intervention. It was there, among the classified advertisements, that they discovered a listing for a spiritual advisor located in Houston. Some 250 miles to the south, the advertisement was bold and filled with promises. The woman, who went by the name of Daphne Wright, claimed she could remove malevolent curses, bestow blessings of good fortune, and restore prosperity to those who had lost their way. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow made contact with Daphne. The journey to Houston was undertaken with a mixture of anxiety and profound hope. When they arrived at her residence, they were met by a woman of commanding presence. Daphne performed a complex ritual designed to cleanse the family of their bad luck, promising them that the dark clouds hanging over their sewing business would soon disperse. Returning to Arlington, the family watched and waited, hoping for a sign that the spiritual cleansing had worked. But the months rolled by, and the sewing business continued its downward spiral. Instead of finding relief, the family found themselves sinking deeper into a financial abyss. Yet, rather than pulling back, their desperation drove them to seek even more assistance from Daphne. They became trapped in a cycle of dependency, pouring their dwindling resources into more rituals, more blessings, and more promises of supernatural intervention. Chapter 3. A Morning of Devastation. The morning of June 10th, 2012 began with a brilliant, clear sky, but for the family of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, it would forever be remembered as the day the light went out. At precisely 7:29 in the morning, an emergency dispatcher in Arlington received a call from a distressed Chao Tran. His voice was trembling as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, who lived in a quiet apartment complex in the city. Chow explained to the operator that his father-in-law, whose name he spelled out carefully as Long and last name Nguyen, was in his early 70s. He expressed growing panic, mentioning that his wife and teenage son had gone to the apartment to check on them and had seen, through an open window, that things inside were in complete disarray. An experienced patrol officer, Officer Weller, was immediately dispatched to the scene. When he arrived, he found the family gathered outside the residence, their faces pale with worry. It was highly unusual to receive a welfare check so early in the morning, and the palpable fear radiating from the gathered family members suggested that this was no ordinary misunderstanding. Officer Weller approached the front door, calling out to see if anyone was inside. He received no answer. Stepping through the threshold, he immediately noted the classic signs of a residential burglary. The living room was in a state of chaos. Drawers had been pulled out, belongings were scattered across the carpet, and items like compact discs were strewn about as if someone had searched the home in a violent hurry. He moved cautiously through the apartment, checking the kitchen and the bathroom, finding both empty. Finally, he approached the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared unoccupied, and Officer Weller began to hope that the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk to escape the disarray of a break-in. But as he turned to leave the room, his flashlight caught a series of disturbing marks. Next to a small, unassuming closet door, there were visible hand smudges on the wall, as if someone had clung to the plaster in a desperate struggle. A heavy instinct, born of 14 years of law enforcement experience, told him that something terrible lay behind that door. Summoning his courage, he turned the handle and pulled the closet door open. Inside, the horrific reality of the scene took his breath away. The elderly couple, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, were bound tightly with silver duct tape in a cruel manner often described as hog-tying. Their heads and mouths were entirely encased in the thick adhesive tape. There was blood splattered across the small space. The sheer brutality of the scene left the veteran officer in a state of profound shock. He stepped back out of the bedroom, unable to speak or even use his radio for a long moment, before finally calling for a supervisor and the homicide unit. Chapter 4. The investigation begins. The Arlington Police Department's Homicide Division had seen many grim scenes, but this particular crime left even the most seasoned investigators deeply shaken. Detective Stewart, a veteran with 21 years of experience in solving homicides, arrived to take charge of the investigation. As the crime scene technicians began their meticulous work of collecting physical evidence, the detectives analyzed the physical dynamics of the struggle. It was clear that the attack had begun the very moment the elderly couple stepped through their front door. There were traces of blood on the entryway carpet, on the couch, on the coffee table, and smeared along the walls leading back to the bedroom closet. The victims had fought desperately for their lives, grabbing at the walls as they were dragged toward the back of the apartment. Initially, the evidence pointed toward a robbery that had escalated into extreme violence. However, as Detective Stewart examined the scene more closely, certain details began to feel unusual. On the coffee table sat a plate containing crushed prescription pills, arranged in a way that suggested someone had intended to consume them. Nearby lay a partially smoked marijuana cigarette. Most intriguing of all was a light blue bandana wrapped tightly around a glass beer bottle. In Arlington, light blue was a color associated with active local gangs, who were known to occasionally extort local businesses. The presence of the bandana felt almost like a calling card, left behind to send a message. Yet, experienced detectives know that sometimes a crime scene can appear too perfect. The placement of the gang colors, the drugs left in plain sight, and the chaotic ransacking of low-value items like compact discs raised a troubling question. Was this a genuine robbery, or had the scene been carefully staged to mislead the police? The investigators decided to keep an open mind, collecting the marijuana cigarette, taking hair fibers, and swabbing the blood splatters to see if they could find any foreign genetic material. They also processed the massive amounts of duct tape used to bind the victims, searching for fingerprints or hidden biological clues. Chapter 5. Whispers of Betrayal. While the forensic teams worked, Detective Stewart sat down with the family to gather background information. Due to the intense grief and shock of the household, Chow Tran was the only family member who felt capable of speaking clearly with the authorities. Chow explained that on the evening of June 9th, the entire family had gathered to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The atmosphere had been joyous, and the elderly couple had stayed at the party until approximately 10 o'clock in the evening. They were given a ride home by another relative, which was the last time anyone admitted to seeing them alive. When asked if the couple kept large sums of cash in the home, Chow admitted that while some traditional families preferred to keep their savings close at hand, his in-laws did not possess much wealth. He described the sewing business as struggling and reiterated that they believed the curse had ruined their financial standing. The following day, the detectives attended the autopsies at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The medical examiner confirmed that while both victims had suffered significant blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted by a heavy object such as a hammer or a small bat, that was not the cause of death. Instead, the examination revealed a far more agonizing truth. Hong Lee's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of duct tape, while Long Nguyen's face was bound with 10 feet of the same material. They had died of suffocation. The sheer cruelty required to inflict such a slow and painful death suggested a deep, personal animosity rather than the random violence of a street robbery. A few days into the investigation, a surprising phone call shifted the focus of the inquiry. An insurance representative contacted the police department to report that the deceased couple held life insurance policies totaling $1 million. When Detective Stewart inquired about the designated beneficiaries, he discovered that one of the primary recipients of the potential payout was none other than Chow, Tran himself. Chapter 6, The Cold Years. On June 13, 2012, Chow Tran was invited to the police station for a formal interview. He was cooperative, explaining that the substantial insurance policies had been established to ensure that the commercial sewing business could survive and continue supporting the extended family if one of the founders were to pass away. Chow and the other family members provided detailed timelines of their whereabouts on the night of the murders, establishing solid alibis that placed them together at the birthday celebration and a subsequent gathering until late into the night. The police collected genetic samples and fingerprints from Chow and every other relative to compare against the evidence recovered from the apartment. When the laboratory results returned, there was a profound sense of disappointment. The genetic material recovered from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette did not match Chow, any family member, or any profile within the National Database of Genetic Profiles. For 2 long years, the investigation stalled. Detective Stewart and his team interviewed over 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and acquaintances, but no viable suspects emerged. The files were placed into the cold case archives, and the hum of the city went on, leaving the tragic deaths of Long and Hong an unsolved mystery. But justice, though sometimes slow, possesses relentless momentum. In the year 2015, a sudden breakthrough occurred. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston on a felony charge of horse theft because a felony conviction required the submission of a genetic sample to the national database. His profile was entered into the system for the first time. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old and had no prior adult criminal record, which was why his genetic profile had not appeared in the initial searches. But now, as an adult felon, his identity was instantly linked to the genetic material left on the marijuana cigarette at the Arlington crime scene. Chapter 7, Unraveling the Plot. In October of 2015, investigators traveled to interview the 19-year-old Willie Guillory. Confronted with the undeniable scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment on the night of the crime, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. Willie revealed that he had not acted alone. He explained that in 2012 his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him to help with a job in Arlington. They had driven 3 hours from Houston, armed with a key to the victim's apartment, which had been provided to them beforehand. According to Willie, the entire robbery had been an elaborate theatrical performance. They had purposely scattered belongings, left a blue bandana, and placed the crushed pills to make the crime appear to be the work of a local street gang. When the elderly couple returned home, a violent struggle ensued, and the victims were eventually incapacitated, bound with duct tape, and left in the closet. When asked why they had targeted this gentle couple, Willie pointed directly to a woman named Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. He claimed that Daphne had complained that the family owed her a massive amount of money and had declared that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead. Armed with this explosive revelation, the detectives moved quickly. On December 16, 2015, they arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas. Faced with the reality of capital murder charges, Bobby also confessed, confirming his nephew's story. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, explained that he had been in desperate financial straits in 2011 after losing his job. Daphne Wright had taken advantage of his desperation, offering him $10,000 to carry out the hit. He revealed that the financial relationship between the victims and Daphne was far more sinister. than a simple business transaction. Daphne had operated as a spiritual loan shark, charging the struggling family astronomical fees for her services. Over time, the debt had ballooned to an astonishing sum between $250,000 and $280,000. When the family could no longer pay, Daphne discovered the existence of the $1 million life insurance policies. She allegedly proposed a horrific solution. By eliminating the elderly couple, the family could collect the insurance payout and finally settle their massive spiritual debt to her. Chapter 8. The Pursuit of Justice. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when Bobby Guillory revealed how he had obtained the key to the apartment. He claimed that Daphne had received the key directly from Chow Tran. This revelation deeply troubled Detective Stewart, who had spent years communicating with Chow as a grieving victim. When investigators attempted to interview Chow again, they found themselves blocked by a defense attorney. In August of 2016, detectives obtained a search warrant for Daphne Wright's Houston home and placed her under arrest. Inside her residence, they discovered detailed financial ledgers that confirmed she was charging clients tens of thousands of dollars for spiritual services, including the removal and placement of curses. The legal strategy that followed was complex. To secure a conviction against Daphne Wright, whom prosecutors viewed as the calculating mastermind behind the entire conspiracy, they made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and honest testimony. During the trial in August of 2019, Chow took the stand. He painted a picture of a family paralyzed by fear, believing that Daphne possessed genuine spiritual powers that could destroy their lives if they did not comply with her demands. He claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, had even suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the debt, a claim that investigators viewed with deep skepticism. The defense argued that Chow was a manipulative actor who had orchestrated the scheme to pocket the substantial insurance payout for himself, using his immunity to escape punishment. Ultimately, the jury delivered their verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby Guillory and Willie Guillory also faced severe legal consequences for their roles in the tragedy. Though the legal proceedings brought a measure of closure, the memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu remained a poignant reminder of the dangers of desperation and the lengths to which greed can drive the human heart. For the community of Arlington, their story became a cautionary tale, a solemn reminder that the true American dream is built on the quiet, honest labor of love, and that those who seek to exploit the vulnerable will eventually find their deeds brought into the unforgiving light of justice. The morning sun always seemed to rise with particular warmth over the city of Arlington, Texas. In the early years of the new millennium, the city was a bustling mosaic of cultures, a place where the old world met the new with open arms. Among the thousands who had come to build a legacy were Long Nguyen and his beloved wife, Hong Lu. They had left Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them nothing but their time-honored traditions, an unwavering work ethic, and an abundance of love for their 3 children and grandchildren. For Long and Hong, America was not just a map of streets and highways. It was a blank canvas waiting for their colorful threads. They settled in Tarrant County, a vibrant area known for its welcoming Vietnamese community. This community had flourished since the late 1970s, drawing in families who sought to preserve their rich heritage while embracing the endless possibilities of their new home. With determination in their hearts, Long and Hong established a commercial sewing business. To bridge the gap between their traditional ways and the fast-paced American market, they enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was 38 years old, charismatic, and spoke English with a confident ease that made him the perfect public face for the business. He managed the contracts, negotiated with suppliers, and shook hands with clients. For nearly a decade, The hum of the sewing machines was the heartbeat of the family. Their dedication paid off in ways they had only dreamed of when they secured a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global commercial giant, including beloved brands like Disney. They were a prominent, respected family, known for their generosity and sweetness. They never bothered anyone, and in return, the community showered them with affection. But as the year 2011 approached, the economic tides began to turn. The cherished contract with the commercial giant was lost, and the steady hum of the sewing machines began to falter. The business entered a quiet, challenging season. In their culture, a sudden string of misfortune was often viewed not just as a financial hurdle, but as a spiritual imbalance. They believed that when the path became dark, one must seek guidance to restore harmony and welcome protection of the traditional gods of fortune. Desperate to protect their family legacy, Chao Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, began searching for a solution. In a local Vietnamese newspaper, they found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a rare ability to lift heavy curses, reverse bad luck, and bring back prosperity. With hope blooming once more in their hearts, Chow contacted Daphne and made the journey to Houston for a consultation. Daphne performed an elaborate ritual, promising that their fortunes would soon turn around. The family returned to Arlington with renewed optimism, believing that the dark clouds would finally part. Chapter 2. The Quiet Morning of June 10th. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, the early air in Arlington was unusually still. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, the Emergency Dispatch Center received a call from Chao Tran. His voice carried a heavy weight of anxiety as he requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, who lived in a nearby apartment complex. "Can you give me their names?" the dispatcher asked gently. "My dad's name is Long, last name Nguyen," Chow replied, spelling out the letters carefully. "He is 70-something right now. My son, my wife, and I went to look. They said they saw everything falling down inside." Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years of experience, was dispatched to the scene. When he arrived, he noticed a large gathering of family members standing outside the apartment. It was a scene that immediately felt unusual for a standard welfare check, especially so early in the day. The family was too terrified to enter, sensing that something was deeply wrong. Officer Weller walked up to the residence and noticed that one of the windows was slightly open. Upon entering the apartment, the signs of a disturbance were immediately apparent. The living room was in disarray, with compact discs scattered across the floor and furniture moved out of place, resembling a burglary. Officer Weller called out, his voice echoing through the quiet rooms. There was no answer. He checked the kitchen and the bathroom, finding them completely empty. The only room left was the bedroom. He stepped inside, shining his flashlight around. At first glance, the room appeared empty, and he felt a brief wave of relief, hoping the elderly couple had simply gone for an early morning walk. But as he turned to leave, the beam of his flashlight caught dark hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. An instinct, honed by years of service, told him to pause. He hesitated for a moment, a sudden tension filling the air. He opened the closet door. Inside the small space, he discovered the quiet, still forms of Long and Hong. They had been bound tightly with duct tape around their arms and legs, and more tape covered their heads and mouths. The severity of the scene was overwhelming. Officer Weller, stepping back into the living room, stood in silence for a moment to collect himself before speaking into his radio to call for backup and the crime scene unit. Chapter 3. The Stage Puzzle. Within the hour, veteran homicide investigators arrived at the apartment. Among them was a detective who had spent 21 years solving the city's most difficult cases. Even for a seasoned force, the scene was profoundly unsettling. The physical evidence suggested a struggle had begun right at the front entrance, with marks on the carpet, the couch, and the walls. At first glance, the apartment pointed toward a robbery gone wrong. However, several unusual items caught the attention of the investigators. A plate of crushed prescription pills sat on the coffee table. A partially burned marijuana cigarette was left nearby. A light blue bandana was carefully wrapped around a beer bottle. In Arlington, certain local youth groups and gangs were known to use specific colors, and the light blue bandana resembled a potential signature. Yet, the sheer intensity of the crime did not align with a typical robbery. The investigators began to wonder if the scene had been carefully staged to mislead them. Most local gang offenses did not involve such extreme, personal measures against elderly individuals who had no connection to the streets. The presence of the bandana and the pills felt almost too convenient, as if someone had laid out a trail of breadcrumbs for the police to follow. The detectives decided to focus on gathering physical evidence. The crime scene unit meticulously processed the apartment, collecting the genetic material from the marijuana cigarette, hair fibers from the carpet and the closet, fingerprint samples from the duct tape and the beer bottle, swabs of physical traces left throughout the rooms. As the physical evidence was sent to the laboratory for analysis, the investigators sat down with Chow Tran, the primary English-speaking representative for the family. Chow explained that the entire family had gathered the previous evening to celebrate Long's birthday. The couple had enjoyed a wonderful evening, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home. Chow mentioned that while traditional Vietnamese families often prefer to keep their savings at home rather than in commercial banks, his in-laws did not possess a significant amount of cash. He painted a picture of a sweet, hard-working couple who had no known enemies in the world. Chapter 4. The Shadow of the Policy. The following day, detectives attended the medical examination. The results revealed a heartbreaking truth. While the couple had suffered physical trauma from a blunt object, the primary cause of death was suffocation due to the extensive layers of duct tape wrapped around their faces. It was a tragic end for two gentle souls who had built their lives on kindness and community. Just as the detectives were wrapping up their initial briefings, a phone call redirected the course of the investigation. A representative from a prominent insurance company contacted the police department. It was standard procedure for insurance providers to notify authorities when a substantial claim was associated with a pending investigation. The detectives learned that there was an active life insurance policy on the couple valued at $1 million. When they inquired about the beneficiaries, one name stood out clearly: Chow Tran. On June 13, 2012, the investigators invited Chow to the station to discuss the business and the substantial insurance policy. Chow was cooperative, explaining that the policy had been established to ensure the survival of the family's sewing business in the event of a tragedy. He provided a detailed timeline of his whereabouts on the night of the incident, explaining that after the birthday celebration, the family had stayed together playing cards until well past 10 o'clock. To verify his account, the police collected genetic samples and fingerprints from Chow and several other family members. When the laboratory results returned weeks later, the findings brought a wave of disappointment. The genetic code recovered from the marijuana cigarette did not match Chow, any of the family members, or any profile stored in the Federal Combined DNA Index System. The investigation seemed to hit a wall. Over the next several months, the detectives interviewed more than 50 individuals, including neighbors, business associates, and community members. Despite their exhaustive efforts, no new leads emerged. The sewing business eventually folded, the family slowly scattered, and the case grew quiet, remaining unresolved for over 3 years. Chapter 5. The Stolen Horse and the Broken Silence. The breakthrough did not come from a high-tech laboratory or a dramatic confession, but from an entirely unrelated and unusual incident in late 2015. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested in Houston for a felony offense involving the theft of a horse because a felony conviction required the submission of a genetic profile into the federal database. Willie's genetic code was entered into the national system for the first time. At the time of the Arlington tragedy in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, a minor with no prior adult record, which was why his profile had never appeared in the database. When the system ran a routine comparison, it flashed a perfect match. The genetic material on the partially burned marijuana cigarette from the Arlington crime scene belonged to Willie Guillory. On October 17, 2015, the Arlington police located Willie and brought him in for questioning, initially holding him on a minor parole violation to avoid alerting others. When a detective sat down with the young man and explained the scientific certainty of the genetic match, the gravity of the situation hit him. Willie broke down in tears and agreed to speak the truth. He confessed that he had been present in the apartment, but insisted he had not acted alone. He had been led there by his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his Uncle Bobby had approached him in June of 2012, asking for his assistance with a task in Arlington. The journey took them 3 hours. Willie explained that Bobby possessed a key to the apartment, allowing them to enter without forcing the lock. The plan, Willie revealed, was to stage a mock burglary to mislead the authorities. Bobby had brought the beer bottle, the light blue bandana, the pills, and the marijuana to create the illusion of a gang-related incident. Willie had smoked a small portion of the cigarette, entirely unaware that this minor action would eventually unravel the entire scheme years later. When the elderly couple returned home, the situation quickly escalated. Bobby had restrained the couple while Willie assisted in moving them into the closet, where they were bound with duct tape. When the detectives asked why they had targeted the specific couple, Willie revealed a name that connected all the pieces. Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. I met Daphne through my Uncle Bobby, Willie explained. She said that people owed her a large amount of money, and she wanted them to pay up. She told my uncle that if they did not pay, she wanted them gone. We were used by Daphne. She was the driving force behind everything. Chapter 6. The Ledger of Curses. With Willie's detailed confession in hand, the investigators moved swiftly. On December 16, 2015, they traveled to Katy, Texas, to arrest Bobby Guillory on charges of capital murder. Initially quiet, Bobby quickly realized the strength of the evidence against him when presented with the search warrant for his genetic profile. He broke down, expressing deep regret and fear, explaining that he had never been in trouble with the law before. Bobby confirmed that Daphne Wright had orchestrated the entire plan, promising him a payment of $10,000. At the time, Bobby had been unemployed, facing severe financial distress, and felt he had no other choice. He described Daphne not as a spiritual healer, but as a financial predator who operated a complex web of spiritual debts. Over the years, the financial obligations of the Sewing family to Daphne had ballooned to an astronomical figure, between $250,000 and $280,000. When Daphne realized they could not pay, she focused on the substantial life insurance policies held by the family. According to Bobby, Daphne had acquired the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran, suggesting a deeper level of involvement from within the family itself. The investigators immediately set out to locate Daphne Wright. On August 31st, 2016, they arrived at her home in Houston. To her neighbors, Daphne appeared to be a strong, family-oriented woman who managed her household with a firm hand. When questioned, she admitted to knowing Chow as a client, but refused to discuss their financial arrangements or the details of the tragedy. The police returned with an arrest warrant and a search warrant for her residence. Inside her home, they discovered a detailed ledger that revealed the true nature of her business. The ledger listed numerous clients, with charges ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 for various spiritual services. including the placing and removing of curses. Chapter 7. The Balance of Justice. The discovery of the ledger provided the prosecutors with the evidence they needed to bring the case to trial. However, to secure a conviction against Daphne as the mastermind behind the conspiracy, they needed a direct witness who could explain the internal dynamics of the family's relationship with her. The state offered Chao Tran a controversial agreement of immunity in exchange for his full, truthful testimony against Bobby, Willie, and Daphne. During the trial in August of 2019, Chao took the stand. He painted a vivid picture of a family paralyzed by fear, believing that Daphne possessed genuine spiritual powers that could bring ruin upon their lives if they failed to pay her fees. Chao testified that his mother-in-law, Hong, had been so overwhelmed by the debt that she had desperately suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay Daphne. Daphne, seeing an opportunity to clear the entire debt, had insisted that both Long and Hong must pass away so they could collect on both policies. The defense strongly contested Chao's credibility, arguing that he had engineered the scheme to secure the $850,000 of insurance payouts for his own benefit, pointing out the lack of written documentation for the alleged $280,000 debt. Despite the intense cross-examination, the jury focused on the overwhelming physical evidence, the ledger, and the coordinated testimonies of Willie and Bobby. In September of 2019, the jury reached a verdict. Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced the legal consequences of their actions, bringing a long-awaited resolution to a complex investigation. Though the legal journey left some questions lingering, the resolution of the case brought a profound sense of relief to the Arlington community. The memory of Long, Gwyn, and Hong Lu was honored not by the darkness of their departure, but by the enduring light of the legacy they had built. Their story served as a powerful reminder of the importance of community, the dangers of falling victim to deceptive promises, and the ultimate triumph of truth and justice over greed. The sewing machines of Arlington were silent, but the warmth, love, and resilience of the community they had helped build continued to shine brightly. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, usually brought a warm, golden glow to the suburban streets. But on the 10th of June in the year 2012, the air felt heavy, laden with an unspoken anxiety. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, the quiet routine of the emergency dispatch center was interrupted by a phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to Chao Tran, a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant whose tone vibrated with a tense, breathless worry. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Gwyn and Hong Lee. When the dispatcher asked for their names, Chao carefully spelled them out, explaining that his father-in-law, Long, was in his 70s. There was a frantic exchange as Chao explained that his teenage son and his wife had gone to the apartment to check on them, only to find the window open and things inside looking completely out of place. Terrified of what they might find, the family gathered outside the residence, waiting for the authorities to arrive. Officer Weller, a dedicated officer with 14 years' experience under his belt, was the first to arrive at the scene. Right away, he could tell that this was not a typical welfare check. An entire family stood outside the apartment building, their faces pale with apprehension. It was far too early in the morning for a routine check, and the sheer number of gathered relatives signaled that something was deeply wrong. Stepping through the front door, Officer Weller immediately noticed the classic signs of a disturbance. The living room was in complete disarray, yet as he moved through the kitchen and the bathroom, calling out into the silence, there was no response. The only room left to check was the master bedroom. Initially, the room appeared empty. The officer turned to leave, but as his flashlight swept across the wall next to a small closet, he paused. Hand smudges marked the wall. A sudden instinctual hesitation gripped him, a quiet voice whispering not to open that door. But duty prevailed. "Officer!" Weller pulled the closet door open, and the sight that met his eyes would stay with him forever. Inside lay the elderly couple, bound tightly with duct tape. There was blood indicating a violent struggle, and it was instantly clear that they had passed away. Shocked and deeply shaken, the officer walked out of the bedroom, momentarily unable to speak or even use his radio, standing in the middle of the living room. He finally gathered himself enough to call for a supervisor and a crime scene unit. Soon, veteran homicide Detective Stewart arrived. With 21 years of experience in the department, Detective Stewart had seen many tragic things, but this scene was among the most heartbreaking. The elderly couple was highly respected, known in the local community as sweet, generous, and hard-working people who had no known enemies. Long Nguyen and Hong Lee had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them a deep love for their heritage and a dream of building a legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren. In Arlington, which boasted a vibrant and close-knit Vietnamese community dating back to the late 1970s, the couple had started a commercial sewing business. They enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow, who spoke fluent English and served as the public face of the business, coordinating with contractors. For nearly a decade, the business thrived, even securing a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major entertainment giant. However, by the year 2011, their luck had taken a turn for the worse. They lost a key contract, and the business began to decline. Desperate to reverse their fortunes, the family turned to traditional spiritual beliefs. In many traditional cultures, when a family faces major crises like financial ruin, they may seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform rituals meant to lift curses and invite good fortune. Searching through a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, advertised services to remove bad curses and bring prosperity. Encouraged by Hong Lee, Chow contacted Daphne and visited her Houston home. She performed a ritual, filling the family with hope. Yet a year later, instead of good fortune, a dark tragedy befell the family. At the crime scene, detectives noted that the attack seemed to have commenced the moment the couple walked through there. Front door. Blood was found on the carpet, the couch, the table, and the walls. The apartment had been ransacked, but certain items left behind caught the investigators' attention. A plate of crushed prescription pills on the coffee table, a marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. While these items initially suggested the involvement of local youth gangs, the scene felt almost too perfectly arranged, as if someone had deliberately staged it to look like a robbery gone wrong. Detective Stewart remained skeptical. DNA swabs from the marijuana cigarette, hair fibers, and fingerprints from the duct tape were sent for immediate testing. Meanwhile, investigators interviewed Chow Tran, who explained that the family had been celebrating his father-in-law's birthday the night before. The elderly couple had left the party around 10:30 in the evening. Receiving a ride home from another family member, Chow mentioned that while Vietnamese families sometimes kept cash at home, his in-laws did not have much, as the sewing business had been struggling. On the 11th of June, the autopsies revealed a devastating detail. Although the victims had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, the actual cause of death was suffocation. The perpetrators had wrapped Hong's face in 25 feet of duct tape and Long's face in 10 feet of duct tape. The sheer malice of the act convinced detectives that the motive was not a simple robbery, but a deliberate intent to end their lives. Shortly after, Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company. It revealed that the couple had a life insurance policy worth at least $1 million, and one of the primary beneficiaries was Chow Tran. When questioned about this on the 13th of June, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the business if either partner passed away. He provided a solid alibi for himself and his family, stating they were playing cards together until late that night. When the DNA results from the marijuana cigarette came back, they did not match Chow, any family member, or anyone in the national database. The case went cold for over 2 years, leaving the family and the community waiting for answers. Then, in the year 2015, a breakthrough occurred. A young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony involving the theft of a horse near Houston. Because he was now an adult with a felony conviction, his DNA profile was entered into the national database. A match was instantly flagged. Willie's DNA matched the marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene. At the time of the murders in the year 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, which was why his profile had not been in the system. On the 17th of October, in the year 2015, detectives brought Willie in for questioning. When confronted with the scientific evidence linking him to the apartment, the young man broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. His 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him for the job. Willie explained that they had driven 3 hours to Arlington, using a key provided to them to enter the apartment, and staged the burglary using beer bottles, a blue bandana, and pills to mimic gang activity. When asked why they had targeted the sweet, elderly couple, Willie delivered an explosive revelation. It was a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated by Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor. Willie claimed that Daphne wanted the couple dead because they owed her a massive amount of money. Armed with this information, detectives located and arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory in Katy, Texas, on the 16th of December in the year 2015. Bobby, who had no prior criminal record, also confessed, expressing deep fear and remorse. He admitted that Daphne had offered him $10,000 to carry out the deed, taking advantage of his desperate financial situation after he was laid off from work. Bobby explained that Chow and Hong had run up a massive debt with Daphne, ballooning to between $250,000 and $280,000, as they continuously paid for her rituals on credit. When Daphne demanded payment, she learned about the substantial life insurance policies. According to Bobby, Daphne masterminded the entire plot to collect on the insurance. Most shocking of all, Bobby claimed that the key to the apartment had come directly from Chow Tran. Detectives were stunned by the possibility of such a deep betrayal. They turned their attention to Daphne Wright, visiting her Houston home in August of the year 2016. Daphne was a commanding presence in her household, living with her husband, Howard, and their 3 daughters, while she acknowledged knowing Chow as a client. She was cold and uncooperative regarding her financial dealings. After obtaining an arrest warrant, police searched Daphne's home and discovered ledgers detailing extraordinary fees of $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and $40,000 for her spiritual services. Her husband maintained his wife's innocence, claiming complete ignorance of any criminal plot. In the year 2015, prosecutors subpoenaed Chow's financial records and discovered that he had purchased a new home shortly after his in-laws' deaths, while the sewing business had folded. Facing potential charges, Chow, accompanied by his attorney, agreed to cooperate in exchange for immunity. Chow painted a picture of psychological manipulation, claiming that he and his mother-in-law were terrified of Daphne's supposed spiritual powers. He even claimed that Hong had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay off the debt, and that Daphne had insisted both must die to cover the full amount. While detectives found the idea of Hong volunteering to be killed hard to believe, they needed Chow's testimony to convict the coordinator of the crime. On the 26th of August in the year 2019, Daphne Wright's trial began. Chow took the stand, portraying Daphne as a greedy and controlling figure who held absolute sway over his family. The defense countered by pointing out that Chow had pocketed $850,000 from the insurance policies, arguing that he was a true beneficiary of the tragedy and had used the immunity deal to escape. Justice. In September of the year 2019, the jury reached its verdict. Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although Detective Stewart felt a lingering sense of injustice that Chow Tran walked away free, he remained steadfast in his belief that truth ultimately finds its way into the light, and that those who do wrong must eventually answer for their actions. The morning sun over Arlington, Texas, always seemed to carry a promise of warmth, casting a bright, golden glaze over the quiet suburban streets. On the 10th of June in the year 2012, the early air was particularly peaceful. Birds chirped from the branches of mature oak trees, and the gentle hum of distant highway traffic provided a familiar background melody to the neighborhood. Yet, beneath the serene facade, a family was gathering outside an apartment complex, their hearts heavy with an unspoken, growing anxiety. Chow Tran, a 38-year-old immigrant who worked tirelessly to establish a life in the sprawling state, paced back and forth on the pavement. He clutched his mobile phone, his fingers trembling slightly as he dialed the emergency dispatch number. It was exactly 7:29 in the morning. When the dispatcher answered, Chow took a deep, shaky breath, trying to steady his voice. "Can you please send someone to check on my family?" Chow asked, his English clear but laced with an undeniable undercurrent of panic. "I need a welfare check on my elderly in-laws." "Can you give me their names, sir?" the operator replied, her tone calm and professional, designed to suit the caller. "My father-in-law's name is long," Chow said, spelling out the letters slowly to ensure accuracy. "Last name Gwynn. He is 70-something right now. He and my mother-in-law live here." As Chow spoke, his teenage son stood nearby, looking anxiously at the apartment door. Chow explained to the operator that his family had become deeply worried. They had knocked repeatedly, but no one had answered. Even more troubling, they had noticed that one of the windows of the residence was slightly open, a detail that felt completely wrong for a couple who valued security and order above all else. Too terrified to step inside themselves, fearing what they might discover, the family chose to wait on the curb, praying for the arrival of the authorities. Chapter 2. The Knock at the Door. Officer Weller was a seasoned member of the local police force, accustomed to the standard rhythm of early morning shifts. When the dispatch call came through, he was nearby and arrived at the apartment complex within minutes. To Weller, this did not look like a typical welfare check. Usually, such calls involved a single concerned neighbor or a distant relative. Here, an entire family stood gathered outside, their faces pale and their posture tense. The search inside. The officer walked up the concrete steps, his heavy boots echoing in the quiet morning. He knocked firmly on the door, calling out to the occupants. Silence was his only reply. With the family's permission, Weller entered the apartment through the unlocked entrance. Immediately, his law enforcement instincts put him on high alert. The living space was in complete disarray, showing classic, telltale signs of a burglary or a struggle. Furniture was pushed out of place. Compact discs were scattered across the floor. Drawers had been pulled open, their contents rummaged through. Weller moved cautiously through the rooms, his flashlight cutting through the dimness. "Is anyone home?" "Police department," he called out, but his voice simply bounced off the walls. He checked the kitchen, finding it empty. He searched the bathroom, finding nothing. The only room left to inspect was the master bedroom. Upon his first quick scan of the bedroom, Weller did not see anyone. The bed was empty, and the room seemed quiet. Believing that perhaps the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk to enjoy the cool air, he felt a brief wave of relief. He turned around to leave the room, his flashlight beam sweeping across the wall near a small closet. That was when he paused. On the wall, right next to the closet door, were distinct hand smudges. It was a small, seemingly insignificant detail, but Weller's experience told him to hesitate. Every instinct he possessed urged him to be careful, yet he knew his duty required him to check every corner. He reached out, grasped a handle, and slowly pulled the closet door open. A scene of deep sorrow. Inside the small closet, the search came to a tragic end. Long Nguyen and his wife, Hong Lee, were there, but they were beyond any earthly help. They had been bound tightly with duct tape, their heads and mouths covered, and they bore the unmistakable signs of a severe physical assault. Weller, despite his 14 years of service, felt a wave of shock wash over him. He stepped back into the living room, momentarily unable to speak or even use his radio. After a few moments of grounding himself, Weller regained his composure. He picked up his radio and requested a supervisor in the crime scene unit. Shortly thereafter, homicide investigators, including a veteran detective with 21 years of experience in the department, arrived at the scene. The investigators quickly noted the extreme violence of the scene. It was clear that the struggle had begun right at the front entrance, with evidence of physical trauma stretching from the living room to the back closet. The detectives began to ask themselves a fundamental question that guides every such inquiry. Who could possibly harbor enough malice to commit such an act against an elderly, gentle couple who were widely loved by their neighbors? Chapter 3. Pursuing the American Dream. To understand the tragedy, one had to understand the journey of Long Nguyen and Hong Lee. In the year 2000, the couple had made the monumental decision to leave their homeland of Vietnam and immigrate to the United States. They brought with them their children, their grandchildren, and a deep appreciation for their cultural traditions. They chose Arlington, Texas, as their new home, drawn by the city's vibrant, welcoming Vietnamese-American community. Long Nguyen và Hong Lee arrived in the United States, year 2000, established commercial sewing business, secured major garment contracts, e.g. Disney. The first major wave of Vietnamese immigrants had arrived in the region after 1975, following the fall of Saigon. Over the decades, the community had grown, establishing thriving businesses, temples, and cultural centers. Long and Hong saw this environment as the perfect place to build a legacy for their family. A family enterprise. In Texas, the couple established a commercial sewing business. They invited their son-in-law, Chow Tran, to help run the daily operations. Chow, who spoke excellent English, became the public face of the business, coordinating with contractors and managing logistics. For nearly a decade, their hard work paid off handsomely. They achieved a crowning milestone when they secured a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a global entertainment giant, Disney. However, by the year 2011, their fortunes began to shift. The highly valued contract was lost, and the business began a steady, worrying decline. As financial pressures mounted, the family turned to traditional beliefs for solace and solutions. In many traditional Asian cultures, spiritual harmony is viewed as directly connected to earthly prosperity. When facing severe adversity, such as business failure or legal troubles, families often seek the guidance of a spiritual advisor to perform cleansing rituals, remove perceived curses, and restore good fortune. Chapter 4. The Search for a Spiritual Savior. Determined to reverse their string of bad luck, Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lee, searched through local Vietnamese language newspapers. They eventually found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed a rare ability to lift negative influences and cast protective blessings. The high cost of hope. Chow traveled to Houston to meet with Daphne at her residence. Intrigued and hopeful, the family agreed to employ her services. Daphne performed various traditional rituals, and for a short time, the family felt a renewed sense of optimism. They believed that their business would soon recover and that their hardships would fade. Unfortunately, The spiritual intervention did not yield the financial recovery they desperately needed. Instead of stepping back, the family became deeper entangled, continuing to invest large sums of money into more frequent and elaborate rituals. Because they could not pay cash up front, Daphne began to extend them credit. Over the course of many months, the spiritual debt accumulated rapidly, eventually ballooning to an astronomical sum of between $250,000 and $280,000. As the debt grew, the warm relationship between the family and their spiritual advisor began to turn cold, transforming into a source of immense pressure and fear. Chapter 5: Red Herrings and Cold Trails. Back at the crime scene in June of 2012, detectives searched for clues that would explain the assault. They discovered several items that seemed designed to paint a very specific picture. A plate of crushed prescription pills lay on the coffee table. A partially consumed marijuana cigarette was left nearby. A light blue bandana was wrapped around a glass beer bottle. To the investigators, the blue bandana was a significant detail. Arlington was home to several active street gangs, some of which utilized specific colors to mark their presence or claim responsibility for criminal acts. However, the seasoned homicide detectives remained highly skeptical. To them, the scene felt almost too organized, as if someone had deliberately placed these items to mislead the police. They theorized that the gang-related evidence had been staged to cover up a much more personal motive, the question of the policy. As part of their standard procedure, investigators began interviewing family members. Chow Tran, acting as the primary spokesperson due to his language skills, met with Detective Stewart. Chow explained that the night before the discovery, the entire family had gathered to celebrate Long's birthday at a lively party. According to Chow, the elderly couple had enjoyed themselves thoroughly, leaving around 10:30 at night, when another relative gave them a ride home. Timeline of June 9th and 10th. 4:30 p.m. family gathers at Chow's home for the birthday party. 10 p.m. family plays cards together. 10:30 p.m. Long and Hong receive a ride back to their apartment. 7:29 a.m. Chow Tran calls emergency dispatch for a welfare check. When asked about potential enemies or financial assets, Chow painted a picture of a modest, hard-working family with no known adversaries. However, a few days into the investigation, Detective Stewart received an unexpected phone call from an insurance company. The representative informed him that Long and Hong carried a substantial life insurance policy worth at least $1 million. When the detective inquired about the beneficiaries, he learned that Chow Tran was among those listed to receive the funds. When confronted with this information, Chow explained that the policy had been established solely to protect the family business and ensure its continuity in the event of tragedy. Because Chow and the other family members possessed consistent, verified alibis for the night in question, and because their genetic profiles did not match the materials recovered from the apartment, the police could not establish a direct link. With no fresh leads, the case slowly went cold. For more than 2 years, the file sat on a shelf, waiting for a spark of new information. Chapter 6: The Unexpected Connection. That spark finally arrived in the year 2015, originating from an entirely unrelated and somewhat unusual incident. In Houston, a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony involving the theft of a horse. Because a felony conviction requires the submission of a person's genetic profile to the National Combined DNA Index System, Willie's biological data was entered into the database for the first time. At the time of the Arlington tragedy in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, a minor with no prior adult record, which was why his genetic profile had never been cataloged. When the system ran a routine comparison, it produced a perfect match to the genetic material left on the marijuana cigarette at the crime scene. The interrogation of Willie. Detectives wasted no time. They located Willie, who was then 19, and brought him in for questioning on a parole violation. When the investigators explained the scientific certainty of the genetic evidence linking him to the Arlington apartment, the young man broke down. Willie confessed that he had been present at the apartment, but he insisted he was not the mastermind. He explained that his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory, had recruited him for a job in Arlington, promising that they were simply going to perform a task to help a friend. Willie detailed how they had traveled to the apartment, using a physical key provided to them to gain entry without force. Their instructions were to make the apartment look as though it had been ransacked by a local street gang. They brought the beer bottle, the blue bandana, and the other items specifically to leave behind as a false trail. However, when the elderly couple returned home sooner than expected, the situation escalated. Willie claimed his uncle confronted the couple, using physical force to quiet them, before they were both secured in the closet. Chapter 7, The Mastermind Revealed. When detectives asked Willie why they had targeted the specific couple, the young man revealed a crucial name, Daphne Wright. He explained that Daphne was a close associate of his Uncle Bobby. According to Willie, Daphne had complained bitterly about people who owed her large sums of money, declaring that if they did not pay what they owed, she wanted them eliminated. The arrest of Bobby Guillory. In December of 2015, armed with this new information, investigators traveled to Katy, Texas, to arrest Bobby Guillory. Facing charges of capital murder, Bobby eventually chose to cooperate. He admitted his involvement, expressing deep remorse and claiming he had been driven by extreme financial desperation after losing his job. Bobby confirmed that Daphne Wright had orchestrated the entire plan, promising him a payment of $10,000 to carry out the deed. He explained that Daphne had become furious over the unpaid spiritual debt of nearly $280,000. Knowing that Chow Tran and his wife stood to inherit a significant sum from the life insurance policies, Daphne had proposed a dark solution. By removing the elderly couple, the family would receive the insurance payout, allowing them to finally settle their debt with her. When investigators pressed Bobby on how he had obtained the key to the apartment, his response left them stunned. She got the key from Chow Tran, Bobby stated simply. Chapter 8. A Deal with the Devil. The revelation that Chow Tran might have been complicit in the plot to harm his own family members forced detectives to reevaluate their entire approach. They subpoenaed Chow's financial records and discovered that following the tragedy, the commercial sewing business had folded, and Chow had purchased a beautiful new home. When detectives attempted to interview Chow again, he declined to speak, directing them instead to his legal representative. The puzzle pieces fit together. To build a flawless case against Daphne Wright, the true instigator of the conspiracy, prosecutors, realized they needed first-hand testimony. They made the difficult decision to offer Chow Tran immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony regarding the business dealings and the events leading up to the tragedy. The conspiracy web. Chow Tran and Hong Lee owed $280,000. Daphne Wright, spiritual advisor. Bobby Guillory paid $10,000. Willie Guillory, accomplice. With his attorney by his side, Chow described a complex dynamic of fear and spiritual control. He claimed that he and his mother-in-law had been terrified of Daphne's purported spiritual abilities, believing that she could place a devastating curse on their descendants if they failed to pay. Chow even claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money and escape the debt, a claim the investigators viewed with immense skepticism. Chapter 9, The Verdict and the Legacy. In August of 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright commenced. The courtroom was filled with members of the local community, eager to see justice served after years of uncertainty. Chow Tran took the stand as the state's key witness, portraying Daphne as a relentless creditor who used fear and manipulation to dominate his family. The defense's argument. The defense team launched a vigorous cross-examination, questioning Chow's credibility and pointing out that he had received complete immunity despite his close connection to the events. They argued that Chow had acted out of pure financial self-interest, noting that the substantial insurance payout had gone directly into his possession. They emphasized a complete lack of paper documentation for the alleged $280,000 debt.